Hi, everyone, and welcome to National Biomechanics Day 2021. First off, my name is Ross Brancati, and I'm a first-year PhD student in the kinesiology department at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I'm a member of the Musculoskeletal and Orthopedic Biomechanics Laboratory, directed by Dr. Catherine Boyer. This video is about balance and maintaining posture, and discusses what balance is, how we maintain balance, why balance is important, how we measure balance in the lab, and then an example case study from one of our ongoing studies. I hope you enjoy listening and learning a little bit about balance and postural control. So to start, what is balance? Balance is defined as a state of equal distribution of weight. In other words, when someone is balancing, they're trying to keep their body in a position of equilibrium to avoid falling over. And whether you think about it or not, you're constantly maintaining your balance if you are in an upright position, whether you're standing or sitting. So in certain situations, it becomes more challenging to maintain balance. I had put a picture of someone on a slack line on the first slide. Slack line is a fairly recent trend that has come out where you take a 1 to 2 inch wide piece of nylon material and you anchor it between 2 points, such as 2 trees. And when you're on the slack line, it becomes very difficult to maintain balance. And as you can see, this individual in the green shorts here is trying to balance on one foot while the slack line is moving up and down. Balance is also important for animals as well. It's a similar idea where if they weren't able to maintain balance, they would fall over. And so some people, or animals in this case, are better at maintaining balance than other ones. And so this dog in this image in the middle is really able to maintain great balance while standing on this chain, similar to the person on the slack line. Another important aspect of balance is that part of it is developed over and as we age. And so when you're a baby or a small child, you sometimes fall a lot while you're walking or running, and that doesn't happen as much when you're an adult. That's also true in animals as well. And so this puppy out here on the right tries to jump up on the couch and stand on 2 hind legs and immediately falls over. And so you can see the difference between this young animal here and this older dog in the middle, and how much better balance this dog has compared to this puppy. So now that you have an idea of what balance is, how do we maintain balance? There are many parts of the body that help us to maintain balance. One of the most important body parts is called the vestibular system, which is found in the ears. And so the vestibular system consists of sensory organs that send signals to the brain to help us maintain balance. Also, the eyes are very important for maintaining balance. If you would like to see how vision impacts balance, you could try to stand up, put your feet side by side, and close your eyes. For an even more difficult challenge, try standing on one foot and then closing your eyes. You should feel a little bit less stable in both of these positions when your eyes are closed as opposed to when they're open. The brain is the control center of the body, which functions to receive input from the eyes and ears and then send signals to the rest of the body in order to maintain balance. And so when the brain receives input from the eyes and the ears, for example, it will send signals to the muscles. Those signals are sent via nerves. And so the nervous system is also important in maintaining balance. But when the brain sends these signals, it tells the muscles at what time and where to contract. And that's what ultimately allows you to maintain your balance. So why is balance important? As I mentioned earlier, you're constantly balancing during activities such as standing, walking, or sitting up straight. If you are not able to maintain balance while doing any of these activities, simply you would fall over, which would be problematic if you're trying to get from one place to another or sitting at your desk and trying to do your homework. Although we typically take it for granted because we don't really think about it, balance really is important. So as I mentioned, balance is important for walking, but also a lot of sports require really good balance. So in this image in the middle, you have a picture of Messi, one of the greatest soccer players of all time, and he's planting his right foot and about to strike the soccer ball with his left foot. And so in order to have a highly accurate strike where the ball will move at a very fast speed and very accurately, like they need to do in professional soccer, he has to have very good balance in order for this whole process to work at the efficiency that it needs to. Another sport that also requires good balance is gymnastics. And so Simone Biles, who's a United States Olympian, needs really good balance to be able to perform her routines on both the balance beam and other events. So as she's standing on one leg and doing flips on the balance beam, obviously her balance is going to have to be extremely good in order to not fall off and receive a high score from the judges. So balance and postural control are not interchangeable, but they are really related. And so postural control is the act of maintaining, achieving, or restoring a state of balance during any posture or activity. Having proper postural control will help an individual achieve good balance and is important for what I mentioned on the previous slide, but also for preventing falls and preventing neck, shoulder, and back pain while sitting. And so I'm sure you've heard about how important it is to have proper posture when you're sitting. And if you're hunched over like this individual with a curved, dramatically curved upper spine, you're eventually going to start to develop upper back, neck, and shoulder pain. And so bringing your shoulders back and pinching your shoulder blades together is important to maintain good posture. Then some older adults also may need assistance in balancing and maintaining their posture, such as with the help of a cane or a walker. And so postural control is essentially how we maintain balance during any activity. So why do we assess this in the lab? Why do we care about postural control and balance? Measuring balance can help us to understand how we control posture. And specifically, these data can be used to learn about the impact of fatigue on balance, how balance changes as we get older, and how it may decline in older adults. If understanding balance can help prevent falls in older adults, and also how injuries can be prevented that are related to poor balance. So it is important to measure balance in the lab for many reasons, not only to limit what is shown here. And up next, we're going to walk through how we actually measure this in the lab. And so two of the key pieces of equipment we use in biomechanics research are motion capture systems and force plates. Motion capture systems consist of a group of cameras that can record where small markers are in the lab space. These markers can vary in size, but most of them are about 1 centimeter in diameter and can be stuck to many different locations on the body, such as the legs and arms. They are made up of a reflective material, and if you look really closely, you can see them on this person. So if you see these white spots all laid out over this individual, those are going to be what we refer to as markers in biomechanics research. So the cameras are kind of strategically positioned at higher up levels within the lab, and all these cameras kind of look at one central volume within the lab space, and then they can pick up and record where these markers are throughout whatever trial you're trying to investigate. Motion capture isn't only used in biomechanics research, but it's also used in making movies and video games. So for example, in the NBA 2K games, they often record individuals doing different dunks, and then they're able to animate those individuals using motion capture. You should also hear more about motion capture throughout this week if you have not already. Force plates are also used in our research. So these devices are essentially really fancy scales that can record forces in the X, Y, and Z direction. So in the front direction, to the sides, and up and down. So these devices are often used together in biomechanics research. This photo here is from the software that we use to analyze this data. And so if you look on the bottom here, these purple squares represent what the force plates are, and then these colored markers are representative of the marker locations on the individual. Don't worry that the right leg looks a little bit different than the left leg. Really just look at how this could resemble a person. And so you have the upper body here. We do not put any markers on the head, so we do not track where that is in space, but you have the two arms here, you have the pelvis region over here, and then you have the right leg and the left leg, and then the 2 feet on the force plate. And so you can see how this stick figure kind of resembles a person. Using the force plate, we can calculate where the center of pressure is, which is represented by this red arrow here. And that's essentially the point where the person is applying their pressure at that given time point. And so we'll go over a few different videos of an individual in a case study of an ongoing study in our lab. So in our lab, we measured how people balance in different stances. And so the first stance is side by side, where one foot is positioned right next to the other foot. The second stance is semi-tandem, where one foot is slightly offset behind the other foot. So you have your right, in this individual, the right foot was in front, and then the left foot was slightly behind at about, and their toes lined up with about the midpoint of the leading foot. The third stance is full tandem, where one foot is fully in front of the other one. And then the last one's just single leg, so only balancing on one leg. So the next 4 slides are going to show us videos of a person performing each of these stances. As the stances get more challenging, so as you move from side by side to semi-tandem to full tandem to single leg, the center of pressure begins to move and sway more. And so the center of pressure, as I mentioned, is represented by this red arrow. And so you'll see this red arrow move back and forth a little bit more in the more challenging stances compared to the side-by-side stance. And you can feel free to try any of these stances on your own. Just be careful not to fall over if you feel like you are losing control of your balance. So first up is the side-by-side stance, where the 2 feet were just placed side by side. So as I play this trial, don't worry about the markers or the segments kind of reflecting in and out. Really just pay attention to where the red arrow is over the trial. So even though this person is standing with a side-by-side stance and they're relatively still, you can actually see that the center of pressure is moving. And this happens to you as well. Whether you think you are moving or not, when you're just standing still, you actually are moving slightly, which can be recorded by the force plate. So nothing too crazy with the side-by-side stance, relatively stable. When we move to the semi-tandem position, you'll see that the red arrow moves a little bit more. And again, don't worry about the segments reflecting in and out. And so again, right foot represented by the purple dots is ahead of the other foot, and the red arrow is moving a tiny bit more than it was in the side-by-side stance. All right, then next up we have full tandem. And you can even see that the individual is using their arms to help them balance a little bit more. And the red arrow representing the center of pressure is moving a little bit more than it was in the previous 2 stances. And finally, we have the single leg stance. And so I want you to watch this one carefully, especially toward the end, because the individual begins to actually fall over when attempting the single leg stance. So you can see that the center of pressure is moving quite a bit, and the individual is swaying, even in their upper body up here, quite a bit during this trial. We attempt to record for 30 seconds, but if they can't meet the 30 seconds, we just stop recording once they fall. So you'll see the individual tries to maintain their balance and then eventually falls over. So feel free to rewind the video and replay that if you want to. So how do we quantify these changes in the center of pressure? So imagine that if you stood over the individual, you were looking down at the red arrow, and the red arrow is kind of moving around in different directions. What you can do is you can trace where that center of pressure is. And so this green arrow represents where the center of pressure started during the trial, such as when we started recording. And then the blue triangle represents where the center of pressure ended after we stopped recording. And so once we start, the center of pressure is going to move all throughout the force plate. Then eventually, by the end, it's going to meet where this blue triangle was. And so we can quantify different measurements, such as the center of pressure range in the anterior posterior direction, or also known as forward and backwards. And so that is just taking the maximum value in this position and subtracting the position of the value in the most posterior or backwards direction. And so you can get a measurement of the distance between those 2 points. You can also look at the velocity, or how fast the center of pressure is moving. And then you can also measure the length of the center of pressure. And so that would be how long of this line, if you were to take this line and stretch it out so it's straight and then measure it, how long would that be? And so what we found was in the side-by-side stance, the center pressure length increased with the increased difficulty of the stances. And so, for example, as you saw with the single leg, that red arrow is moving a lot more than it was with the side-by-side. And so that length of that center of pressure is going to be much greater in the single leg than by the side-by-side. Side-by-side was at about 1,300 millimeters, whereas the single leg was almost at 2,000 millimeters. The range was also increased significantly with the decrease in the stance, or sorry, the range also increased with increasing stance difficulty. And so if you look at the side-by-side range, it's just over 20 millimeters. And if you look at the single leg, it's almost at 50 millimeters. Granted, this person did fall over during this trial, so that's going to make the range a little bit greater. But either way, you can see that as the stance difficulty increases, the range also increases. And same thing with velocity as well. And so as you become less stable, the center of pressure is going to move back and forth at a faster rate compared to if you were in a less or a more stable position. So increasing the difficulty of a stance decreases an individual's ability to control their posture. People, especially older ones, are at higher risk of losing control of their balance in more challenging stances, and this could lead to greater chances of falls, which can be dangerous in elderly individuals. And so you can give this a try yourself. You can try balancing in the 4 different postures that were shown in this presentation. And you can answer the question of, do you find that your postural control declines when the stance difficulty increases? And you can also try removing one of the feedback centers for maintaining balance by closing your eyes and repeating the 4 stances as I had mentioned before. And then you could see if removing the vision declined your postural control. So if we were in the lab, we would actually be able to have an individual partake in this experiment, but unfortunately we can't do that. So we'll hope for next year. That's all I have. So thank you for taking a listen over, and happy National Biomechanics Day 2021.